In this presentation, I will present my bachelor thesis. The topic is classification and analysis of pore in laser powder bed fusion. I will start with a fast overview of the project. The topic is the additive manufacturing of metallic material using the laser-based powder bed fusion method, an additive manufacturing technology that uses a high-precision laser to selectively melt thin layers of metal powder, creating a solid component based on a digital model. The process takes place in a chamber filled with inert gas to prevent oxidation of the powder. Each layer of powder is evenly spread over a platform and melted by the laser in the desired area. Subsequently, the platform lowers slightly and a new layer of powder is deposited, repeating the cycle until the part is completed. This technology presents certain limitations, including the presence of defects within the final product. These defects appear in the form of porosity, which can have different origins and geometric characteristics. It is therefore essential to identify and classify them to understand the origin and their effect on the mechanical and structural properties of the final product. For this reason, the study focuses on the identification and classification of pore found in the additive manufacturing of metallic material produced from AlC10Mg powders using the L-PBF method, and on the identification of the pore clusters. To this end, CSV files generated from X-ray computed tomography of specimens were analyzed with Matteo. First of all, porosity in the laser powder bed fusion process can originate from three main sources. We can have gas porosity, lack of fusion, and melt point instability. Gas porosity generates pores that are typically caused by inert gas trapped during the atomization process, or moisture present on the powder surface, or a rapid cooling of the molten metal, which prevents the escape of hydrogen. Gas porosity are characterized by small and spherical shape. Then we can see the lack of fusion. This type of porosity arises primarily from incomplete melting due to suboptimal printing parameters as low power or powder sputtering during the process. Lack of fusion spores are generally large and irregular in shape. Finally, we can have melt point instability that include chiral pore, which from due to instability in the melt point often caused by excessive laser power or unstable processing condition. These pores are spherical but larger than those caused by gas porosity. Each of these types generates distinct pores in shape and size, as shown in the image at the right side of the slide. The classification of porosity was carried out using three geometric parameters identified from the literature. Bounding box factor is the first and is the ratio between the shortest dimension S and the longest dimension L of the pore. The second one is the compactness indicator. This is the ratio between the volume of the pore and the volume of a sphere with the maximum radius of the pore. And finally, we have the sphericity indicator, that is the ratio between the surface area of a sphere with the same volume as the pore and the actual surface area of the pore. All these parameters are valued between 0 and 1, and they allow for a detailed classification of pore based on their geometry. Using the geometric parameters illustrated in the previous slide, the pores detected through X-ray computed tomography were classified. For each pore, the value of the three geometric parameters were determined, and the pores were classified as spherical if they had compactness greater than 0.4, and sphericity and bounding box factor greater than 0.6. Following this classification, spherical pores were further divided into three subclasses, A, B, and C, based on the diameter increasing from class A to class C. All pores did not meet the criteria for spherical classification were categorized as irregular. Once classified, the pores from each class were plotted on a compactness with sphericity graph to visualize their distribution and characteristics. In this slide, a compactness sphericity graph is presented, showing the pores of each individual class separately to give us an easier visualization. In this way, we can appreciate that all the parameters are fundamental for the classification. Firstly, the bounding box is critical for identifying irregular pores that might otherwise be misclassified as spherical. Secondly, without compactness, pores in area 2 would be incorrectly classified as spherical. Thirdly, without sphericity, pore in area 3 would also be misclassified as spherical, and finally, without the Bandy-Box factor, irregular pores area in area 4 be wrongly identified as spherical, despite meeting compactness and sphericity threshold. In this slide, we can see the last type of pore present in our specimen in the compactness sphericity graph on the left side, and in the right side, we can see a chart that provides a clear representation of the porosity class distribution. Subsequently, it is possible to see the spatial position of the pore. In this 3D representation, different colors represent different classes of pores. Then the k-means algorithm was applied using as input the three geometric parameters defined earlier, instructing the function to divide the dataset in two parts. It was observed that the division of pores into spherical and irregular one is very similar to the one obtained using the classification illustrated in the previous slide. We now move on the identification of cluster. To achieve this, the DB-scan algorithm was adopted. The pore coordinates an epsilon neighborhood and a minimum number of pore n that must be present in the neighborhood to define the pore as belonging to a cluster were provided as input. The function defined two vectors. The output vector label was used to define cluster, which is a column vector that assigns a value of -1 to the noise point and a unique positive number to all the other points belonging to the same cluster. The cluster present in the analyzed cylinder were then illustrated in the 3 dimension. In the representation, an epsilon of 10 VOX and n equal to 3 were used. Subsequently, the number of pore involved in cluster, the blue line, and the number of pore belonging to the most populous cluster, orange line, were represented as the neighborhood epsilon varied. Finally, the centroid of the cluster were identified by calculating the average value of the coordinates of the point belonging to the same cluster. It is possible to see in this animation the pore in blue and the centroid of the cluster in red. In conclusion, it has been possible to classify the pore based on their geometry and define their spatial distribution in the analyzed specimen. We observed that they tend to concentrate along the edge, likely due to high thermal gradients and gas enrichment caused by rapid cooling. Furthermore, by leveraging the DB-scan algorithm, we identified clusters of porosity, which are particularly critical as they represent a gray zone for stress intensification, ultimately compromising the mechanical properties of the material. This insight enabled us to compare various thermal porosity treatment techniques to determine which provide the most beneficial effect. Additionally, has been possible to compare process parameters such as laser speed and power, as they significantly influence pore formation and distribution. Understanding this factor is crucial for optimizing the additive manufacturing process and enhancing the final product quality. The most relevant thermal treatments in this field are the isostatic pressing that reduces internal defect and then changes fatigue resistance by modifying the microstructure, the laser post-processing that improves surface quality, microhardness, and overall mechanical properties, and finally the in-layer laser remelting that can eliminate pore or bring them on the surface of the specimen. The detailed characterization of the pore has also provided crucial insight into their impact on mechanical properties such as fatigue resistance. Indeed, porosity clusters play a critical role in determining the structural integrity of a component. Among the defects analyzed, surface defects were found to be more determinantal than internal ones, as they induce higher stress concentration. Additionally, it was observed that higher pore sphericity led to lower stress intensity compared to irregular porosity. Finally, clustering algorithms like DB-scan and k-means have proven highly effective in identifying patterns within the data. This tool enabled the analysis of porosity distribution without relying on rigid parameter thresholds, providing a more flexible and adaptive approach to defect detection and quality control.